Well now, boy, I'll leave you to it." With that, the sheriff exits the store, leaving the youth alone with the slovenly shopkeeper. "Let me see," thinking out loud. "Well, first, boy, you can empty this here spittoon." Young Perkins walks around the counter, only to be greeted with the disgusting sight of an overflowing spittoon. Young Perkins swallows hard in an attempt to keep his breakfast down. Stomach churns as the slime-covered container is gingerly lifted. "Just toss it in the gutter outside, boy," voices the slovenly clerk. Young Perkins carries the spittoon as one would carry nitroglycerin or any virulent virus. Step by step, inch by inch, slowly, he makes his way out the door, across the porch, and down the steps, all to the amusement of the poor whites seated on the empty barrels that rest along the walls outside. As young Perkins reaches the bottom step, his attention focused solely on the spittoon, he inadvertently steps on the old hound dog, who gives out a sharp yelp, causing young Perkins to stumble forward. Losing his balance, he falls, spilling all on the sidewalk. The nauseating catastrophe only adds to the amusement of all who erupt in uproarious laughter. The young man carefully wipes his face, a face that has been grossly sprinkled by generous amounts of viscous, malodorous splatterings. Young Perkins is given one loathsome chore after another, not to mention the fact it was he who was required to clean the spot on the sidewalk that had been so grossly beslimed. The tools of removal, a putrid rag and a rusty bucket, no gloves. Finally, as the day wore down, it fell upon the young man to perform his final duty before the sundown law came into effect. Seeing the waning of the autumn sun, at the approach of dusk, the store clerk informs the young man that he is to go to several of the houses where, with notepad and pencil, he was to write down the various items that the town's residents needed ordered from Jackson for the approaching Thanksgiving holiday. Young Perkins visited the various residences of the citizens of Musky. Some greeted him with surprise, seeing a young Negro boy on the doorstep. Others greeted him with cold looks. Their prideful arrogance forces them to refuse to place an order, stating that if they needed anything from a nigger, they'd rather starve. Meanwhile, others were kinder, mostly the elderly. Some greeting the young man with indifference, placing an order of perhaps a can of cranberry sauce, spices, or other such small necessities that the occasion required. The men of the town mostly ordering varying brands of beer. It continued like that on and so forth. But as young Perkins reached a certain section of town, it all came rushing back. The houses became familiar. He was retracing the path that he and Jonah had taken the night they had defied Musky sundown law. He remembered how frightened he was, how he fled, abandoning Jonah, how cowardly he behaved by hiding in corners in alleyways. He was now nearing the deputy's house, where he remembered the smacking sound of flesh on flesh. He remembered how Jonah's reflection from the kitchen light revealed his cruelly battered face. Young Perkins recalls how the two stood transfixed, gazing through the kitchen window as the deputy had performed the loathsome act of a Mississippi douche. He shuddered as he remembered how he had become confused in his flight and had come face to face with the town's demonic god, the tree, that hellish tree. The young man's pace slows as he reaches the corner where the deputy's house stands. Young Perkins was required to pay a call on the neighboring home located at the rear of the deputy's home. It is then that he notices the deputy's little sister on the back porch, seated on the bottom of the steps. There she slowly sips from a bottle of soda. Something about her caused him to pause. It was the look in her eyes. There was an expression that young Perkins couldn't quite fathom. More, she seemed agitated, anxious, flustered. Again his curiosity got the better of him as the youth continued staring, wondering what the young girl would do next. Shock mingled with horror as he watched the young girl whistle in the direction of the house, where an old hound rested sleepily in a small wooden doghouse. Slowly the animal loped across the yard, crawling under a section of fence. It approached the young girl, who began gently stroking the animal, first the head, then its back. The hound, gaining the young girl's trust, did as all dogs do when presented with kindness. It offered its greeting by licking her face. She laughingly turned her neck as the animal continued in its affirmation of friendship, its tail happily wagging. It was a warming sight. Such a lonely child. One might say it was a hallmark moment. A moment of bliss. A moment of peaceful camaraderie. The young girl all the while speaking gently, kindly, her loneliness reflecting a soul that had been as abused as that of the hound. How sad she appeared. How pitiful. Young Perkins' heart ached to the point of breaking. He was deeply touched. He felt a genuine sympathy for the loathsome deputy's little sister. He hadn't realized that she was just as much a prisoner of Musky as any other of the poor whites that resided within the town. But what came next sent the young man's mind reeling. My God! My God! No! No! Clasping both hands against his mouth, he struggled to keep from screaming, to keep from uttering a single syllable. He clasped tightly to his mouth, the way in which he stifled Kevin's screams that night at the potter's field. For what at first appeared the innocent act of one lost soul consoling another, twisted and contorted itself into something repulsive, something so utterly abominable, something absolutely beyond belief. For as the young pubescence continued stroking the hound with one hand, with the other, she probed the beast until her hand found its way to the animal's penis, where, to the young man's mind-numbing shock, she began to masturbate the animal. She continuing her motions until its organ became engorged with blood, until its crimson-red spear-tipped head protruded from its shaft. There she heaped blasphemy upon blasphemy by spreading her legs and inserting the beast inside of her hairless vagina. Its primal instinct aroused, the hound eagerly began delivering jackhammer thrusts. She, with one hand clasping tightly to the railing of the banister, with the other, she began rapidly slapping the animal's hindquarters, encouraging the beast. Her cheeks flushed a deep red, her eyes clenched shut as she greedily fed her hunger, a hunger as rapacious as it was rabid. The hound all the while feeding her ravenous womb, feeding its own beastly appetite, its own hunger. It was hard for the young man to discern which was more the animal, she or the hound that mounted her. She, being in the throes of orgasmic ecstasy, gripped firmly onto the edge of the step where she sat perched, with pelvis tilted up to receive deeper thrusts. The animal continued its rapid motions, its crimson unsheathed penis pounding her pelvis like a piston. In doing so, the hound inadvertently knocks over the soda bottle which rolls down the steps and onto the ground there to rest, its contents mingling with the dust beside her bare, dirt-encrusted feet. The aroused hound's forepaws grip tightly around her waist. The sound of the hound panting merged with the breathless panting of the young girl. The animal, its mouth begins salivating, dribbling saliva down on the young girl's heaving throat, reminding the horrified youth of the way in which the deputy had salivated that night. The night he and Jonah watched the deputy as he used his own sister like a piece of meat. How he performed the grotesquely heinous act of a Mississippi douche, all to feed his incestuous lust. All seemed silent save for the sound of she and the hound panting. There was a sickening smacking sound, a sound that by the moment became increasingly distinct. It was the young girl's nubile womb oozing with a slimy mucus that the hound had so foully moistened. Soon she approached orgasm, her pelvis moving up and down with a rapidity that equaled that of the hound. Young Perkins wanted to avert his gaze, to look away, but his eyes were strangely fixated at such an unnatural act. My God, dear Christ, young Perkins' soul cries out in sympathy for the girl. How totally, how completely she had become debased. He was sickened by the sight of such beastly debauchery. Her face yearned for release. How desperately the young girl strained. Her pitiful moans revealed the anguished struggle to slate the hunger that burned within her slobbering womb, to at least for a moment put to rest that which the deputy had long since awakened. Now her only thought was to quell the fever that burned inside. Her only desire was to ease the gnawing torture by achieving climax. Angered shouts reverberated from within the home, frightening the hound, which quickly lopes away, leaving the young girl angry, her pelvis continuing its motions. At the screen door, the figure of a heavy-set colored woman emerges. It is none other than Booker and Jojo's mother, Mama Pearl. "Girl, what did I tell you about that damn dog?" Mama Pearl chastises the young girl. I swear your brother, he gonna shoot that damn mutt." The young girl rises and rearranges her tattered, greasy yellow dress. Walking up the steps, she takes a seat in an old rocking chair that rests on the edge of the porch. The young girl's face reflects not an ounce of shame, murmuring insults under her breath. Mama Pearl, all the while ignoring the young girl, with basket in hand, she tends to the laundry by hanging sheets on a nearby clothesline. As she does so, she begins humming an old gospel tune, one that is familiar to young Perkins, one that is often heard in church. It was later found that Mama Pearl had been asked by the sheriff to tend to the deputy's mother, who had been bedridden for years by a polio epidemic. The deputy himself had once had a wife, but she was not from Musky. She deserted the family, abandoned the deputy after being physically forced to be the recipient of the vile, denigrating act of a Mississippi douche. What was to the residents of Musky a natural thing, a final requirement after intercourse, to her, the act was abhorrent, repugnant. But the young girl continues to hunger. Her throbbing, salivating womb continues to cry out like a child crying to be fed, its appetite unabated. For as sickening as it may be, the act of intercourse with the hound, however so brief, had stimulated her, aroused something deep inside her. Remaining unsatisfied, she is steeped in a state of nymphic agitation that borders on near hysteria as she nervously searches for escape. Her eyes scanning her surroundings, her head turning left and right, she continues looking for something, anything. The insatiable wretch suddenly notices the empty soda bottle at the foot of the steps. She hurriedly walks a few paces, bending down, she retrieving the bottle. Returning to her seat, she places one foot on the seat of the rocking chair, then scooting to the edge, she continues to pleasure herself with the cone-shaped neck of the empty soda bottle. The deputy's little sister had no concern for Mama Pearl, despite her age. Mama Pearl commanded no respect whatsoever. In her warped little mind, Mother Pearl was just another nigger, something to fetch and carry. Young Perkins was ashamed for Mother Pearl not wishing to be discovered. He eased off, leaving the scene behind, forgetting all about the neighboring home of which he was to have an order placed. He rapidly walked in the direction of the country store. The scene would haunt him for years to come. He was deeply ashamed for Mama Pearl, for she often bragged that she worked in town. In fact, she was one of the few Negroes that did work in the town of Musky. Like all of the Negroes, she would be required to leave before sundown, to tread the long path that led back to the black community of Colored Town, or Nigger Town, as the poor whites called it. No one in the black community knew that she worked for the deputy. All Mama Pearl would say when asked was, "I's works for quality white folks. I works in town." It's true that through graft, the deputy did have a few more dollars than the other poor whites. It is true that Mama Pearl did in fact earn what was in those days considered a substantial amount of money, especially for a colored woman, $5 a week. But the price, dear God, the price she had to pay. As young Perkins approached the country store, the usual denizens that haunted the perimeter had filed away to their homes. Assumably, they were settling in for the night. Perhaps their families were preparing dinner from whatever sustenance available within the cupboards and cabinets. But upon entry, the two elderly men remained seated in their usual seats, still engaged in the game of checkers. The store clerk questions young Perkins. "Well, boy, let's see that ledger." The young man presents the clipboard with the various lists of sundries that the town's residents required. "Well now," chewing his tobacco, spits in an empty spittoon. "That's pretty good handwriting, boy. I reckon you be gone off now. Sun going down. You know what that means. I tell you what, boy, I ring up the sheriff and have him take you home. You did a right nice job for me today. Here, boy, I reckon you earned a little something for yourself." The storekeeper presses the button. The bell rings as the register drawer opens. Digging in the change box, he withdraws a quarter, placing it on the counter. "That's for you, boy." Young Perkins' eyes were large to see 25 cents. Back then, a quarter was quite a bit of money, especially for a 13-year-old colored boy in 1930s Mississippi. The young man's grateful grin is returned by yellow tobacco-stained teeth, which once more present an offering into the empty spittoon. "You just sit down out there on the front stoop, Sheriff. He be around directly." The storekeeper walks to the edge of the counter where an old-fashioned hand-crank telephone is attached to the wall. With a few revolutions of the hand crank, he contacts the sheriff's office. A short discussion is heard, the words being imperceptible to the youth who now sits outside on the edge of the porch of the country store, awaiting the arrival of the sheriff's car, which shortly arrives. Seated in the driver's seat is the sheriff, who honked his horn twice, getting the young man's attention. "Well, you coming or not?" inquires the sheriff. "I'm coming," answers young Perkins. Opening the door, the young man sits quietly as the sheriff speeds in the direction of Colored Town. "How did everything turn out?" the sheriff asks. "Not too bad. I earned a quarter," replies the youth, pleased with his monetary gain. "Well, a whole $0.25. Well, I'll say. Well, boy, now that you're a working man, I reckon you're going to be a mite more help to your people, especially your grandma." "Yes, sir," the youth responds. The sheriff notices young Perkins' lack of enthusiasm. His face denotes a look of deep introspection. The sheriff's tone softens. "What's wrong, boy? What got you down?" The scene of beastly debauchery keeps flashing before his eyes. He is ashamed of himself for even being witness to the repugnant act. He feels nothing but shame. Shame for Booker, shame for Jojo. But most of all, young Perkins feels deeply ashamed for Mama Pearl. "Sheriff, how long Mama Pearl been working for the deputy?" His voice lowering to a whisper. "My granny, Miss Hazel, not even Pastor Jackson, nobody knows that she works for the deputy. I don't know. I just don't think it's right." "Oh, so that's what's got you so down in the mouth. Well, boy, I tell you, she been working for the deputy quite a spell. That's that. I know that you don't want it to go no further than here, so just let that remain one of those little secret colored folks know about, but don't count it to be a fact. It's best we keep it that way. You're a bright boy. You can keep a secret. Bless your soul. You can keep hers. Mama Pearl's got her pride. Let's see she keep it. Plus, the deputy needs somebody to watch that little sister of his. That there gal's half wild. Don't mind her. She's just trash, just like the deputy. They all trash around here, just poor white trash. Most don't amount to nothing. Most of them don't amount to a hill of beans. But you mind what I told you. Stay clear of that there Bubba and Darryl. They the cause of most of the mischief around here. They're behind a lot of these here doin's. They especially likes it when they gets a colored gal. They likes to brag on how tight colored gals be. They ain't studdin' no white gals. Darryl, he say white gals be too loose. Even the white virgins don't be as tight as colored gals. Well, anyway, that's what Bubba say. That's why from time to time, specially when they get all liquored up, they goes huntin', hoping they can catch themselves some poor colored gal walking home alone. It's like a sickness, like they got some kind of fever. At last, the patrol car pulled up in front of the widow's home. Well, boy, home at last. "Thank you, Sheriff." Young Perkins expresses his gratitude as he exits the patrol car. The sheriff honks his horn. Pressing his foot hard on the accelerator, the patrol car speeds away, leaving plumes of smoke wafting through the air. Young Perkins remembers how the widow had tricked him. Carefully turning the knob, slowly he opens front door, where to his surprise he smells dinner. The widow calls from the kitchen. "Well there, little man, I see you made it back all right. How was your day?" Young Perkins, still a bit shaken by the young girl's debauchery, merely shrugs and says, "Oh, okay, I guess. Wash your hands. Dinner's ready." Young Perkins goes through the customary motions of preparatory cleansing. Exiting the bathroom, he finds dinner placed before him. Today's fare: deep-fried catfish, fresh string beans, Louisiana-style jambalaya, and hush puppies. Gazing at the dish with hungry eyes, the young man exclaims, My, Hazel, is all this for me?" With a wink of an eye and the click of her tongue, she affirms, stating, "Well, now that you're a working man, you need a working man's supper. Plus, It's my way of making up for that little trick I played on you the other night. Pouting precociously. You ain't still mad at me, is you, little man? You ain't mad at your girl, Hazel, is you? Placing a tall mason jar filled with ice-cold lemonade on the table before him, she with a finger tickles his chin while presenting young Perkins with a quick peck on the cheek. Her pleasant demeanor, and the fact that she referred to herself as his girl, causes the youth to beam like an electric light. The expression on his face alone told all. She had been forgiven. She had gained a reprieve. She was still his girl. After taking her place at the table, she once more begins to question young Perkins, inquiring as to the events of the day. Her queries force his hearty appetite to slacken, swallowing hard as his stomach churns. Scenes of beastly horror begins flashing before the young man's eyes. Perkins yearned to tell Miss Hazel. He wanted to describe the sickening scene of debauchery. He wanted to tell her that he had seen an act of depravity so depraved, so decadent, so primitive, so primal in its bestiality that it leveled on the demonic. A scene oozing with slime, its viscosity sent imaginings of the putrid essence, the stench so vile, so steeped in loathsome discharge that from the time of Lucifer's fall, nothing on par had lined the walls of the halls of hell. The widow notices the expression of nausea on the young man's face, questioning, "Ain't you hungry no more, little man?" Whereupon the young man pushes the half-finished plate away, along with the mason jar still half filled with lemonade, thinking to himself, thank God it wasn't fried tomatoes and fried okra. That would have brought my dinner up. Young Perkins excuses itself from the table, leaving the widow in a state of curious wonder. Passing through the hallway, he enters the bathroom where, turning the knob, he splashes cold water on his face, bending down over the face bowl, battling the urge to vomit, to regurgitate, to spew out all that he had witnessed that day. From the overflowing spittoon to the final scenes of the deputy's little sister with the hound, and again with the bottle, all while in Mama Pearl's presence.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really immersing ourselves in some quite intense sources, detailing a single, just relentless day in the life of a young man named young Perkins.
That's right. Our goal here is to analyze this grueling experience he has. It's set in this fictional town, Musky, Mississippi, probably around the 1930s.
But terrifyingly plausible, right?
Oh, absolutely. And this isn't just a story about, external oppression like racism or forced labor, though those are definitely there.
What else are we seeing?
The sources really dig into this underlying moral rot, a kind of social decay that, honestly, it affects everyone in Muskie, even the people who seem to benefit from the town's strict structure.
And that structure includes the sundown law. We should probably explain that quickly.
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't always a written law, but it was brutally real. Essentially, black people were forbidden from being in town after dark. Period.
So every single thing young Perkins does this day, it has this terrifying ticking clock attached to it.
Exactly. And his day, as the sources lay it out, it's just this escalating series of horrors. Starts with forced chores, then this difficult run collecting Thanksgiving orders.
And it ends with this final, really shocking observation he makes that just sort of collapses his whole world.
Yeah. So let's dive in. It starts, quite literally, in filth.
Right. The first loathsome chore, as the source calls it, assigned by this slovenly shopkeeper, he has to empty an overflowing spittoon.
And the detail there is quite vivid. Perkins is described carrying this slime-covered container Genuinely, like it's nitroglycerin or any virulent virus.
It's deliberate, isn't it? The public nature of it.
Completely. It's about humiliation from the get-go. And then comes that moment where he trips over an old hound dog.
And falls. And he's instantly covered in, the source says, generous amounts of viscous malodorous splatterings. Just awful.
Vile. And the reaction. The poor whites gathered outside, they've just erupt in uproarious laughter.
So his degradation is their entertainment.
Precisely. It reinforces this perverse social order where even the most disenfranchised white people can feel superior by witnessing black suffering.
And the punishment for falling just piles on more degradation. He has to clean the mess on the sidewalk.
With just a putrid rag and a rusty bucket. No gloves, nothing.
It's just relentless contamination, setting the tone for the whole day. His physical being, his dignity, totally irrelevant.
Absolutely. It establishes right away. His body is disposable. His suffering is a spectacle. That's the baseline in Musky.
Okay, so he gets through that horror. Then his day shifts, right? He has to go out into the town.
Yeah. His final task before dusk, before that sundown deadline, is to collect Thanksgiving orders. Items people want brought in from Jackson. He goes door to door with a notepad.
And this essentially becomes a map of the town's social attitudes, doesn't it? The way people react to him.
It really does. The sources show a whole spectrum. Some folks were just, surprised to see a young Negro boy on the doorstep. Standard sort of reaction, maybe.
But not all.
Oh, definitely not. Many greeted him with cold looks, this real prideful arrogance. Some flat out refused to order, even saying things like, if they needed anything from a nigger, they'd rather starve.
Wow. That level of hatred. It's hard to fathom. Refusing necessities just because of who's asking.
It tells you how deep it runs. There were a few kinder moments, though.
Who were they from?
Mostly the elderly, apparently. Placing small orders, cranberry sauce, maybe some spices, little things.
And the men, what were they ordering?
Primarily varying brands of beer. It paints this picture of a town fueled by, well, necessity for some, small kindnesses from a few, and a whole lot of alcohol and ingrained prejudice.
So while he's doing these rounds, walking this route, something else starts happening inside him.
Yes. This is where the trauma really surfaces. The houses, the streets, they start to feel familiar. Too familiar.
He realizes he's walking the same path.
The exact path he and his friend Jonah took the night they broke the sundown law. The night everything went horribly wrong.
And just being near the deputy's house again triggers this awful flashback.
A really severe one. The sources describe him reliving the fear, hiding in alleys the moment he abandoned Jonah. The guilt must have been immense.
He remembers hearing sounds from the deputy's house that night.
Yes, the smacking sound of flesh on flesh. Horrifying. And then seeing Jonah's face, cruelly battered, caught in the kitchen light.
And this culminates in remembering the specific act he witnessed the deputy performing. The sources call it the loathsome act of a Mississippi douche.
That term, it's specific and really disturbing. The source material suggests it's not just random violence, but a kind of ritualized sexual degradation, central to the towns. Well, it's sickness.
And we see it mentioned again later, right? It seems pervasive.
It does. Like, the very landscape holds the memory of this specific violation. It's chilling.
So he's standing there, reeling from this memory, and he sees the deputy's little sister on the back steps.
Right. And initially, young Perkins, who seems quite perceptive, feels sympathy for her. She looks agitated, anxious.
He thinks she's trapped, too, basically. Just as much a prisoner of Musky as any other of the poor whites.
That flicker of empathy makes what he sees next even more jarring. She's petting the old hound dog. Seems innocent enough.
But then it twists.
Abruptly, yes, into something the sources call repulsive, something so utterly abominable. It shows just how damaged she is, psychologically.
The description is incredibly graphic. He witnesses her engaging in sexual acts with the animal.
Yes, the source details the masturbation leading to intercourse, and her physical state, flushed cheeks, clenched eyes, tilting her pelvis. It's described in painful detail.
And this connects directly back to the trauma he just relived.
Immediately. The sound of the dog panting, the saliva, it reminds him of the deputies salivating that night, the night he used Jonah, and the implication is his own sister, in that same violating way, performing that Mississippi douche.
It's a horrifying cycle of abuse being reenacted.
Exactly. The abuse the brother inflicted is now being played out, almost ritually, by the sister with the dog. It's completely devastating.
And Perkins is just frozen watching this. The sources say his eyes were strangely fixated. He's sickened, but also feels this awful sympathy.
Sympathy for her total debasement, yeah. He sees her desperate need to, as the source puts it, put to rest that which the deputy had long since awakened. She's trapped in this cycle, trying to process her own trauma in the most destructive way possible.
And then someone else appears, Mama Pearl.
Yes, Booker and JoJo's mother. A large colored woman emerges from the screen door. She scolds the girl, but mostly because she's worried the deputy will come out and shoot the dog.
And we find out Mama Pearl is actually working there, inside the house.
Yeah, she's caring for the deputy's mother, who's bedridden with polio.
Which adds this whole other layer. Economic desperation, complicity.
Exactly. She's one of the very few black people who can work in town. She tells everyone back in the community she works for quality white folks.
And she earns $5 a week, which was a lot back then for a colored woman.
A substantial amount.
Yeah.
But the cost is this terrible secret. Nobody in the black community knows she works for the deputy, the man who embodies so much of the town's violence and corruption.
Perkins feels ashamed for her, understanding the impossible situation.
Deeply ashamed. And the source gives more context here, too, about the deputy's previous wife.
Right, she left him because she was forced to endure that same vile, denigrating act of a Mississippi douche.
And horrifically, the source notes that many in Musky considered this act a natural thing, a final requirement after intercourse.
The normalization of it is just mind-boggling. It's beyond belief.
It really is. And even after Mama Pearl comes out, the sister, she isn't finished. She retrieves a soda bottle.
Still showing that nymphic agitation, as the source calls it.
Yes. And she uses the bottle's cone-shaped neck to continue pleasuring herself, right there.
With absolutely no regard for Mama Pearl.
None at all. Showing no concern, viewing her as just another nigger. The girl's own trauma and degradation completely override any sense of shared humanity or respect for the woman risking so much.
Perkins has seen enough. More than enough. He just leaves.
Understandably. He retreats quickly, forgets the last house he was supposed to visit, just burdened by this shame for Mama Pearl, and heads back to the store.
Back at the store, there's this strange moment of almost normalcy.
Kind of. The clerk comments on his handwriting, pretty good handwriting, and gives him his pay. A quarter? 25 cents.
Which, again, the source points out was a substantial amount of money for a boy like him in that time and place.
That quarter is basically his payment for witnessing the town's absolute moral freefall. That's the transaction.
Then he gets a ride home with the sheriff, back towards the colored section of town.
And the sheriff notices something's wrong. Perkins is quiet, withdrawn, not his usual self.
When the sheriff asks, Perkins finally voices his worry, but carefully. He asks about Mama Pearl.
Yeah, he says something like, my granny, Mrs. Hazel, not even Pastor Jackson. Nobody knows that she works for the deputy. I don't know, I just don't think it's right. He confesses his unease.
And the sheriff's response is revealing.
Very revealing. He confirms Perkins should keep it secret, partly for Mama Pearl's pride, but also because, pragmatically, the deputy needs someone to watch his sister.
He calls the sister half wild, and then says something quite blunt.
He does. He calls her trash, just like the deputy. They all trash around here. So the sheriff sees the rot. He understands it.
But he still upholds the system.
Exactly. He enforces the structure that allows it all to continue. And then he adds that final, chilling warning.
About Bubba and Daryl, telling Perkins they go hunting for colored girls walking home alone.
And the reason he gives, it's just stomach-turning. It's not even about just opportunity. It's based on this sick comparison.
They think white gals be too loose and that even the white virgins don't be as tight as colored gals.
It explicitly links the racism and the ritualized sexual violence. It's seen by perpetrators, as the source suggests, almost like a sickness, a fever they have. It's just baked into the fabric of Musky.
So finally, young Perkins gets home. Mrs. Hazel is there. She's forgiven him for some earlier trick, and she's made supper.
A real working man's supper, fried catfish, jambalaya, hush puppies, lemonade. It should be a moment of comfort, of safety.
But he can't accept it, can he?
No. The psychological damage, the weight of what he's seen, it's too much. The sources say the scenes of beastly horror just keep flashing in his mind.
He wants to tell Miss Hazel to share it, but he can't.
The memory is too visceral, the viscosity, the stench so vile.
Yeah.
Thinking about the spittoon, the sister, the deputy, Mama Pearl's secret, the sheriff's words, it's overwhelming.
He pushes his plate away, can't even drink the lemonade. His body is rejecting nourishment because his spirit has been so poisoned.
Yeah, and the day ends with him in the bathroom, physically trying to expel it all.
Trying to vomit, to regurgitate, to spew out all that he had witnessed.
It's like he's trying to purge the actual filth of the spittoon, the moral filth of the sister's actions, the complicity, the violence, trying to purge Musky itself from his system.
So summing up this day, It's a journey from that initial physical humiliation straight into the town's moral abyss and ending with the realization of constant systemic danger. That quarter cost him far more than just labor.
It cost him dearly. It was payment for bearing witness to the absolute rotten core of the town, and it inflicted deep, lasting trauma.
And what really strikes you reading these sources is how this depravity isn't isolated. It's like a sickness, that fever the sheriff mentioned, and it infects everyone.
Absolutely. It trafficked the oppressed like Perkins and Mama Pearl through racism and economic need, yes, but it also consumes the supposed privileged. Look at the deputy's sister reduced to this state of horrifying self-abuse. Nobody escapes Musky's moral decay.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, our listeners, to really chew on. That phrase, the Mississippi douche, keeps appearing. It's linked to the deputy's wife leaving, to the attack on Jonah, and it underlies the sister's actions. It seems like a defining, almost ritualistic act of violation in this town.
So the question to ponder is this. Considering that pervasive, almost normalized atmosphere of ritualized violence, how might the sheer ubiquity of something like that, this specific degrading act, contribute to the profound, dehumanizing despair we see infecting literally everyone in Musky, from the top to the bottom?